powered by Riverside FM.
Our Earth is degenerate in these later days. There are signs that the world is speedily coming to an end. Bribery and corruption are common. Children no longer obey their parents. Every man wants to write a book, and the end of the world is evidently approaching. These words, not conclusively confirmed, are often attributed to an Assyrian tablet from around 2800 BC. Current thinking instead suggests that they may come from a short Sumerian essay. In any case, they are ancient words which many might feel apply these days, or indeed have a timeless quality. Their overarching bleak outlook draws on specific references to worldly problems such as corruption and childhood disobedience, and indeed it is the latter that often resonates. The recurring theme, older people complaining about the younger generations, is something which has persisted across cultures and time periods. And it was this theme of older people's view of the younger generations that led me to retrieve this quote. I recently joined a work training event that was focused on the theme of people management and communication. The event included several breakout sessions where participants discussed topics and questions in groups of around 8. Over the course of the event, I joined several of these groups, and one theme that came up a number of times was disparaging remarks from managers about colleagues that would fall into Generation Z. In their view, Gen Z had a different approach and attitude to work, with a degree of entitlement around what they did or didn't need to do, and allegations of snowflakish behavior in respect of feedback. It was noticeable that there were no Gen Zs in the room to defend themselves. And whilst I recognise some aspects of the points put forward, there was little self-reflection on the reason why things were as they were. There will be a separate future podcast covering work ethic and work attitude. But in this one, I wanted to go back to something simpler. Why is Gen Z such an exciting name, and how does it fit with the other generations? Hence, I'll be taking a look at the themes and definitions of the different generations. Roughly speaking, there are 7 categories of generation that will capture everybody who is currently alive. Running through these in chronological order, the first is termed the greatest generation. Roughly speaking, this captures people who were born between 1901 and 1927. Most of this generation lived through World War I and the Great Depression. Many of them went on to fight in World War II. They're followed by the silent generation, roughly those born between 1928 and 1945. This generation was defined by World War II. It overshadowed much of their lives. Some of them were involved directly, and others were children during the war. The silence in their name comes from a tendency to be reticent to talk about their experiences. Following them come the baby boomers from roughly 1946 to 1964. They grew up in a post-war economic boom and experienced huge progress both socially, culturally, and economically. They witnessed the civil rights movement and the space race. This apparent era of progress and improvement in living standards is the root of the more recent generation's envy and backwards jibing at the boomers. Next came Generation X, the first generation to use the lettering system. These are people who were born between roughly 1965 and 1980. They experienced the end of the Cold War and the rise of many modern pieces of technology. The term itself was popularized in a 1991 book, Generation X: Tales for an Accelerated Culture, which sought to capture a mood of disillusionment among young adults. The X itself could be seen to symbolize a degree of ambiguity. This was a generation which didn't have the same defining war or event as the previous 3. They are also known for seeking to break away from traditional norms and expectations, which fits with the use of an X as an unknown. Following them, we have the millennials, also known as Generation Y, albeit the use of the term millennials does tend to dominate over Generation Y, and to my mind at least, is more evocative, capturing the turn of the millennium as being a key part of their lives. It also fits more neatly with giving character to individual generations. Those defined as a millennial are people born between 1981 and 1996, and of which I am proud to say I am a member. Like Generation X, we have seen significant changes in technology and communications, and indeed I think they have built with greater speed during our lifetimes. We were not born with smartphones and Wi-Fi, but they quickly became a natural part of our lives. We haven't experienced events like World War I or World War II, but we have experienced globally defining moments, including 9/11 and the global financial crash. I, probably like all generations when we are young, for a long time, was acutely aware that we were the youngest generation and enjoyed that role. But this is no longer so. Hot on our coattails has come Gen Z. These are people roughly born between 1997 and 2012. It still remains scary that those born within the new millennium are now functioning adults and in roles of responsibility. But of course, they could easily be as old as 25 by now. This generation are truly digital natives. The internet has been everywhere throughout their lives. They are also perhaps the generation most affected by COVID-19, an event which would have affected them at a key point in their formation, with many missing time from school or university. And finally, following Gen Z, and still at the forming stage, we now have the coming Generation Alpha. These are roughly people born since 2013. They remain children, but not for much longer. They will be born into a world shaped by AI, automation, and we expect them to be hyper-connected, something we can already see in the way that they interact with technology. In terms of naming convention, I have to say it was deftly done to flip back from Z to the start of the alphabet. However, I secretly hope that after 2 generations in a row focused on letters, we can return in future to a more qualitative naming for the next generation. But I also sincerely hope the ancient tablet was wrong, and that the next generation will neither be Generation Omega or the last generation.